Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, and with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
This show is brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation and the Compassionate Friends.
Dr. Tashel Bordere is an assistant professor at the University of Missouri, Columbia. She is an expert on death and dying, grief among African American youth, particularly homicide deaths. She co-edited a book called Promoting Social Justice Perspectives in Grief and Loss. And she spoke to my students at Columbia University on the sudden death of a friend or a sibling, sudden death in general, and what's going on in the African American community. And she spoke about New Orleans because she's an expert on that and from New Orleans, and various rituals that can help kids and help save at-risk children. She's a rock star.
Oh,
welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So great to have you on the show today. Talk a little bit about your research and the kinds of things that you've been doing for at-risk kids, particularly in the Black community.
Okay. Well, I do a lot of work with Black adolescent male youth, looking at their experiences with violent death losses, not just the violence piece, but the death piece that encompasses a serious look at attention to their loss experiences. And so what I found is a number of these youth are coping with multiple significant losses over time, so cumulative losses.
So they're dealing with not only family members, but they're dealing with friends, they're dealing with, cousins,
violent deaths of friends,
maybe
family
even
members,
a gang
neighbors.
that they're in, which
Perhaps.
is like a family. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's all sorts of deaths that they're having.
Yes. And they're coping with a lot of these deaths in the absence of support, and oftentimes by well-meaning people who probably would love to support them, but don't feel equipped with the tools to adequately provide that support. And so we have a lot of youth who have to persist by engaging in various strategies to stay safe, because they aren't getting some certain types of support. So basically my approach is that we've looked at all types of things. We do the Stay Safe, we do the DARE program, and a number of those programs are not effective. And we do anger management even, but we're failing to look at these youth as holistic beings. My partner's a physician, and as a physician, you look at multiple aspects of a person when you're trying to provide treatment to help those individuals. And so with our youth, especially our Black male youth, we're needing to do the same thing, not compartmentalize them, but look at the multiple losses that they're coping with to support them.
So how do you help them, Tashel? I mean, these kids have had all these losses, and oftentimes they don't have support of people. So what works?
Well, I'll tell you some very hopeful things that have happened. One is I do a grief education program in Missouri right now. It's a shared grief education program, Surviving, Healing, Evolving Through Death. And what I find both in my research and also in practice is that these youth are very pleased to talk about their experiences. And so we need a lot of healing work with these youth to see some changes occur.
And we need to give them places where they can talk about it.
Yes, yes.
Instead of just not say anything and go on with life, and not give them a place to be able to talk about what's happened.
Yeah, I think it's hopeful that these teens show up.
How do you get them to show up?
I validate that they've had a loss experience. Oftentimes they're coping with so much that it's normalized in our society, and so they're enacting all of these dangerous strategies, needing to carry a gun or that mask that they show on the outside when they're coping with so much on the inside. And so I sit with them and I lend them my ear. I bring water and peanut butter crackers. I mean, that's very basic, but I start with just very basic needs and validate their loss experiences.
Yeah.
And they have a lot to share.
I like,
and they
I
show
like
up.
that you give them food, too.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you one of the most recent things that was a very hopeful experience is that I was at a school where there was a student death due to a shooting. And so you have some people who are friends with the perpetrator and some students who are there who are friends with the deceased. And so in my time with them, I do all types of things, from acknowledging their loss to helping them establish a safety plan to looking at the next 55 years of their lives. And I focus more on the life perspective. I acknowledge the loss, and then we focus on life.
That's interesting, because a lot of them are kind of living day to day, not even thinking about what they do down the line, right?
Yeah, it's hard to envision marriage, and it's hard to envision having children and grandchildren. But here's the coolest thing. Although, unfortunately, they expect to die, and that's realistic because they're surrounded by rampant violence, many of them hope to live.
Wow.
And I think that's the best part about it, is they hope to live. And so we end with they expect to die and they're desensitized, but they hope to live. And part of our charge is to find ways to support them in this hope, this quest to live, this quest for survival, this quest to prolong their lives. And so again, when I meet with them, we talk about a safety plan, like what are they going to do at the funeral? Revenge is a very common reaction or response to the death of a person. They're hurting and they want these families to hurt as well. And so I help them establish safety plans, what they're going to do as the funeral approaches. So and this is very powerful, I have to say this. You know, in the cases of sudden death, we don't get an opportunity to say goodbye because it's so sudden. So a lot of our youth feel very guilty about this notion that they couldn't say goodbye, that they would have, if they had only picked them up 5 minutes sooner to take them to a basketball court, this wouldn't have happened. And so I actually capitalize on that. I give them a chance in their time with me to think about, since they were closely connected to the deceased, what they would have said to the deceased person in terms of a goodbye or last words, and last words that may have been shared by the deceased to them. And almost unanimously, the last words that they perceive would have come from the mouth of their loved one would have been, be safe. I love you and be safe. And so I use that when I'm talking to the teen. So I say, aha, so, not aha, but not like that. But I basically say, you know, so this person cared about you, and it looks like they want you to be safe, so it looks like they also would like to see you live. And so how are we going to honor that? And so that is another thing that I do, so that they're able to not just hear it from me or read it in the newspaper, but they can own it for themselves, because now they're charged with what they thought would have been their person's last wishes.
I love that. It's almost like the people that have died are speaking to them to a certain extent.
Yes, I use my time with them to give them that opportunity. So it gives them a chance to say goodbye, and then to also keep their loved one near and carry on life.
Now, now do you see them on a weekly basis? How often do you see them?
No, I do intervention in school, so based on whether they receive me, and that's also very important in hope. Like accepting help, as our teachers can't do everything. Our educators are charged with so much. And so having, so the training that I'm doing kind of helps, would help teachers, counselors, school principals, administrators have some basic understanding of children in grief and death.
That's what I was going to ask you. Are there certain things that schools can do, just certain do's and don'ts? I mean, at the beginning, if there's been a loss in a school? Yes.
Understand that some youth will be hypervigilant.
Okay.
That students miss days at points. At this recent school that I did an intervention in, the children were absent from school just because of fear of what could happen to them by showing up, because they knew the perpetrator, or things like that. So understand that they might be
for their own life.
Yes.
Okay.
But I also found that this one school where they're doing remarkable work, that these children, they have such an environment where they're able to have their experiences validated, that they do show up to school following these shootings and these different events, because schools can also be a safe haven for them, and should be. So one thing that I would highly recommend is training. Is you know, whereas only 1% of shootings actually happen on school grounds, but most violence happens in neighborhoods. But those experiences get brought into the school setting, and so just so that teachers understand that in every school there are grieving children, and in some areas especially they're coping with higher rates of violence, and that training would definitely benefit them to have.
I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with Dr. Heidi Horsley. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, lean on ours till you find your own. And God bless.